and congratulations. I think you are the true heroes and the BIM champions, obviously, of your office. That's why you're still here at this time. My name is Madeleine Louw, and I think it's quite ironic that I actually stand here. I studied architecture at TIX years ago. I was never a really great student, though. My head was always everywhere else. So. For the last 20 years, I've been building buildings, and then recently I decided to start applying my design knowledge to more towards designing systems than necessarily, buildings itself. Just a quick thank you to everybody at Arambi, the organizers and the sponsors, for actually making this day possible. I mean, we really need these kinds of conversations. I also want to qualify that what I'm going to tell you today is not novel or revolutionary or evolutionary in any kind of way. No, of none of the, of the Aries, but nor is it ordinary, So it's some of the most basic ideas in BIM that we have heard of for years. What I'm telling you today is a bit like shoes, shorts, and shirts. Nothing new, but boy, if we don't have them, we look a bit silly. And what we've realized is that some of our clients have forgotten some of the shorts sometimes even. And we recently did a poll with, I'm not going to say design professionals, because it wasn't only design professionals, it was industry professionals. It was architects, engineers, construction managers, it was operations managers and clients. And we asked them, what is the thing that your team, what is the skill that your team needs to strengthen the most before they adapt new technology features? And 51% of people said that my team needs to learn how to organize data and models better. We need to become more disciplined in how we do it. That's basics. We thought those things were in place, but we've also heard today how they're not in place at all. So we all struggle with that. And by the way, 50% is enormous. Usually when we run these polls, we get like 35, 39%, that's max. 51% is huge. It's a majority. It would own the company if it was if it was a company. We have seen some really interesting ways of working today. We've talked about pretty advanced things and possibly moving to the next level and looking at 4D elements, 4D type of working environment, and also thinking about how AI could influence our workflows. But I wonder how many of us are genuinely ready for what's coming and have thought about how to prepare our teams. Have we thought about whether our BIM game is sharp enough to let us stand out among the crowd and actually, still be visible to our clients? That didn't work. Oh, let me press the button. Old school. See. So, Jean Nouvel said that each new situation requires a new architecture. This is as applicable, to our office and our system architecture as it is to our building architecture. As AI enters almost every layer of our lives and platforms shift from file-based tools toward connected, data-driven platforms, we need more than new technology. We need good architecture for how information, people, and processes can work together. It's not the first time that we actually find ourselves in this place, though. So about 600 years ago, there was a time, when we were struggling with good systems as well. Things were disconnected. So there was a comment about Werner's image before about how old school it was. Now, this is really old school. And it wasn't generated at all, obviously. So when we think back, pre-14th century, actually. So drawings and paintings were composed using an artist's intuition, symbolism, and often the status of an object or a person. So how high you were on the rank, how high you ranked, depended on how big an object was. So perspective didn't determine that. If we think of our perspective today, it goes from big to small. There's a vanishing point. But that wasn't the case always. There were times when people just drew on intuition. So each artist developed their own way of depicting depth and perspective, which made it near impossible to scale and collaborate multiple works in a meaningful way. The two works on the sides are from the same artist. The middle one still has a block and an arch, so the composition roughly looks the same. But the mountains at the back, are completely different, from the people in the front. There was no system. Without a formalized process, work was limited to the genius of one person, often in isolation. But then came Brunelleschi. Brunelleschi transformed art and architecture by introducing a mathematical system for representing three-dimensional space, making perspective accurate, repeatable, and teachable, rather than depending on individuals' intuition. This was math. It was an algorithm. Just because it was an algorithm doesn't mean it's super strict, because eventually people learned to draw in perspective in freehand, so they had freedom. But it took a lot of practice, and he had to develop the method first. His method established a shared visual language that enabled artists and architects to design, communicate, and analyze space with unprecedented precision. Then, because everyone worked from the same principles, drawings became easier to understand, compare, and build upon. We could make bigger things just because of this. Greatly improving collaboration that we've been talking about a whole lot today, across both artists, architects, and craftsmen. Across both the designers, the documenters and the detailers, and the contractors on site. This proves both the importance, the impact, and the need to properly design a system for building information. So how do we know whether our BIM game needs sharpening? Whether our information architecture needs a redesign? We can look at a few signs that show up in our teams right now, telltale signs that actually we need to improve the way that we're working. The first sign is that we are simply using BIM. And I've heard this word, unfortunately, in this room as well. We're using BIM. BIM is not something that you use. It's a process or a system. But we're simply using BIM, and that we model more than we manage information. We are simply creating geometry that isn't properly referenced in its context. We can identify this sign when you can identify this sign when your schedules still live in Excel and proper naming conventions aren't applied. Simple things. And there's a simple way to fix it, and that's having standards. It's like when your teenage daughter comes home with you can see that this guy's a Yahoo, you know? He's, and you know that what you need to teach her is higher standards. And that's what we need with BIM. We need higher standards to, get rid of the chaos that's in our, offices sometimes. Another way of just thinking about this is BEPs. But instead of these 80-page BEPs, if an 80-page DEP doesn't impact your team, then don't do it. Condense it down into what's most important. Get it onto one page and get people to actually use it. So that was a little slow, but here we go. What about when coordination feels chaotic? So fragmented models, disconnected spreadsheets, again, endless email chains. We've heard about the WhatsApp because it's real, it still happens. And last-minute revisions that sometimes only surface once we are on site. All these things competing to define the latest version of the truth. Often teams spend more time finding, checking, and reconciling information than using it to make better decisions. We can fix this, though. This is probably one of the highest governance areas. We've heard about governance, and I think it's important to actually define high and low governance areas. Design and early stage design is a low governance area. You need to be able to actually mess around with ideas and change your mind every 5 minutes. That's a low governance area that needs to eventually fit into a higher governance area, where things are very strict and you have to move from one stage to the other one. But this one is high governance. There needs to be certain things that happen, because then teams can coordinate more effectively by establishing a common data environment. We've heard about those. Clear responsibilities, the governance, and consistent processes for issuing, reviewing, and approving information. This creates a reliable source of truth, allowing people to focus on resolving design issues rather than searching for the latest information. So what do we do if our model starts slowing down over time? So your third sign. The clearest sign that this is happening is when you have a team in your office. I'm specifically talking about the designer side of things. You have a team in your office where every morning when you walk into the office, they have unusually long coffee breaks because they're waiting for their models to sync. You know, that usually means that you need to start thinking about doing health checks, audits, routine purging, and possibly reconsidering your workset management strategy. Simple things, we just don't implement them, you know, consistently. So the fourth sign is avoiding open workflows. No, let's stay there for a moment. Architecture has long actually celebrated the image of the solitary genius. We know them. It's the starchitects. We have a word for them. But just because we are used to seeing stars doesn't mean we have to have a star software in our workflows. So this sign that we need open workflows also applies actually to the BIM champion in your office. I called you that, it's still a compliment, by the way. But often we rely too much on the one person who knows a lot of things. That means that our process, our BIM process, that we're supposed to be a process, is reliant on one person instead of actually being a process that we can apply and repeat and teach to other people. So when it comes to software, I always think about it in ecosystems. An ecosystem has a river that runs through it, and then a lot of things that happen that branch out from it. Forests, meadows, animals that can thrive. You do need a river that runs through it. That doesn't mean it's the star. It just means it's the backbone for the ecosystem. So choose your software the way it allows interoperability, that allows specialized tools to plug into it where it needs to. So that we can start sharing information in a better way. There's also now, we have access to data exchanges and data connectors that allow us to share data instead of file formats across platforms. This greatly increases our ability to translate information from one application to the other. So we need to make use of these data connectors to communicate data instead of file formats that sit inside of a software application. So choose the backbone software that will allow you to make these data connections between software. Sign number 5. Architecture also, once again the same environment, has long cultivated a culture that glorifies excessive work. We're really good at this. Late nights in the studio at university become hard to shake habits that mean late nights in the office. But let's not be so bent on celebrating that culture and keep it alive that we insist on keeping workflows manual. We don't need to automate every corner of every process, but at the very least, we can be strategic about where we deploy automation. Whether that is creating sheets, validating naming conventions and parameters, or building a custom agent that understands our office standards and start doing quality control on our own work. Like, that's up to us. We need to decide the level that we actually apply that automation. But we should be intentional about it. Don't just let an AI loose inside your models. It's a recipe for disaster. Assistants and MCPs are lowering the bar to entry into automation. And custom scripting, but this will only really be effective if we make sure that LLMs have access to clean, well-organized data. So, what happens when we run these 5 diagnostics and make a few adjustments to establish reliable methodologies? A reliable system, just like Brunelleschi's. What happens when we have clean data standards, governed information, automated workflows, and interoperable exchanges? Only then can the competitive question change from, how do we use this tool? How do I operate this software? Where do I find this feature or this button inside of my software? And we can start changing that question to, what entirely new services can my company offer? What kind of design processes can we develop? What kind of design styles even might come from this? Parametricism was one of them. And business models become possible, new business models become possible once the methodology is in place. So remember that the Renaissance happened only after Brunelleschi came with his new system. Thank you.